Well, this is so good to be with you and to begin a discussion that I think people are having in a number of places in our church right now. And that is a discussion about how do we relate to each other and how do we make decisions together. Since the beginning of the Episcopal Church, we have governed ourselves democratically with the full participation of lay people, clergy, and bishops. Many of us take that for granted, but no one took it for granted at the beginning of the United States, at the end of the American Revolution. No one took that for granted. And as some of you know, there was a huge set of arguments about how this group of, we call them Anglicans, but that's not a good historic term. They saw themselves all as Church of England, members of the Church of England, how in this new nation that had been so successful in opposing the King of England, how were they going to maintain an organization of their theology and what they considered essential in that theology? They had, of course, the prayer book, and they weren't going to give that up, though they certainly had to change it. And they, though, had also a deep influence of what had happened in the country. Now, I'm not sure what would have happened to our Episcopal Church at the beginning if we didn't have the fact that a good number of our clergy who supported the king and were opposed to the revolution left. That certainly did help, right? But when the smoke cleared, the majority of the what would become Episcopalians decided that they wanted a church not only that was connected to their understanding of their historic church, but was also new. And they wanted a church that was influenced by what they had been influenced by. And that was an understanding that individuals should be able to participate and make decisions for themselves. Now, we will probably talk later in this hour about the fact that they had a very limited vision and definition of who those individuals should be, but they did know that they should be lay people and priests, or they would call presbyters. And they came together and decided that they would form a denomination that had at its head no person, no one human would be the head of this denomination. This denomination would be headed by some representative body of everybody. And that head would be a group of people, a convention. And so they invented the idea of General Convention at the same time that they were revising the prayer book, and before they had an idea of where they'd put bishops. Now, the other piece, of course, was bishops, and they came up with a very radical idea about bishops to go along with this idea of a convention, and that idea was elect them. They would not be appointed. And so all of these pieces come together, and eventually we have, in a very few years, an organization of a denomination that was so importantly unique that it lasted. Fundamental pieces of that beginning were never changed. We never changed the idea of electing bishops. We never changed the idea that when we all got together, all the orders and lay people would be represented. Now, there were a group of bishops who wanted to meet by themselves. We had an argument about that, and a group of bishops compromised and won, right? And so we ended up with a bicameral legislature. But nevertheless, everyone who came to that general convention was elected by other people. No one came there because one person sent them. Now, that general convention, of course, went on to do a number of remarkable things. And I always try to think of the general convention as an invention that helped us be the church. That group of people coming together from the very beginning, not only did the polity that I talked about, not only did the adoption and revision of the prayer book, but they went on to argue that we should be a missionary society. We should see ourselves as a church, as a missionary society. They went on to say that in our lifetimes, that we should have a prayer book that included a very explicit set of vows at our baptism, which have become such a popular force in our church. And we figured out what songs to sing. We figured out what rules there would be about divorce and marriage. We figured out that ordination should be extended to women and ordination should be extended to LGBTQ people. All of those things came out of conventions. And that means that all of those things were argued about and all of those things were decided by people who had been elected to decide them. So I would like to begin our discussion talking about how does this system of governance, which of course extends to dioceses and to parishes, how does this system of governments work for us now at this just incredibly difficult time? How does it work for us? And how should we best use it as we make our decisions about this virus and pandemic? And how do we use it as we make these decisions about this incredible recalling of people to the concern of racism in this country and other parts of the world? How do we use it?